Welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sheena White.
And I am your other host, Jerry Garcia.
Today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, protecting your business.
Wonderfully exciting and interesting world of insurance and other ways of protecting your business.
We are not lawyers, but we are insurance agents. Things people
That's
don't
true.
know about us. We actually both are licensed insurance agents. And for a while, we had a insurance agency before we decided that
we went down that path. We wanted to focus on what we're doing now.
But insurance is super duper important, and so is your legal entity structure and all of those sorts of things. Really make sure that you protect yourself. I think so many people, they think to themselves, oh, I have an LLC, I'm protected. But they end up piercing their own corporate veil quite a bit.
Why don't you explain what that means? Piercing the corporate veil.
Okay, so people think if I have an LLC, then if my business gets sued, none of my personal assets can be sued as well. And that is true to an extent. And again, okay, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any legal advice. Talk to an actual lawyer. They're smarter than me. They know enough to be dangerous.
We will talk about what our experiences have been without definitely making sure this is not legal advice.
None of this is legal advice. What happens, though, is say that you utilize your business account for a ton of personal expenses, or the bigger one is if you buy business stuff with your personal cards. You have intermingled your finances, so you've basically, where you separated them with this LLC, you've pushed them back together and you've made it available for any lawsuits to then enter into your personal assets.
And you built this wall, right, between the two to create but then you put in a window with a counter so you can move things back and forth.
Yeah, you can't do that. And that will be, by any good attorney, will utilize that to their advantage.
I mean, as they are welcome to at that point, honestly. That's why the LLC alone isn't enough. You want to keep that very strict delineation of what is business, what is personal, not intermingle those funds, allow yourself further protections. We're going to talk about some of that stuff too. A big piece of that is insurance, and not only just having insurance, but also having the right types of coverage and making sure that the insurance is drawn up correctly so that if you ever do need to file a claim, you can actually make that claim.
I know so many people, especially women, more in the past, but people who have home-based businesses, they have inventory. So say, your Mary Kay lady, she got tons of inventory. Ularo was huge, those crazy patterns everywhere. They had tons of inventory. The interesting thing about your homeowner's insurance is it does not cover any business stuff. I actually met a woman once. She had over $100,000 worth of inventory in her basement. And I said to her, I was like, oh, where is your commercial policy? She said, what are you talking about? It's in my home. I was like, I get it, but this is the fun thing. Your home burns down tomorrow, you're getting $0 for any of that because your homeowner's policy does not cover that. It's business stuff. It's excluded unless you have riders and things like that. And I don't know, to my knowledge, there's not a homeowner's insurance policy that's going to give you a $100K rider.
Right.
So you need commercial insurance for your inventory. If you are storing things at your home, like a lot of tradespeople utilize their home garages or sheds on their home, places on their home that they're utilizing for business purposes. That can be great because then you can rent that space to your business and you can, write that off on your taxes. But on the other side of that, you need to protect yourself. Anything that's in there, you have to have a commercial policy or you have to have that rider on your homeowner's policy because none of that stuff is covered, generally speaking.
Not only that, the business itself, right? We talked about classification of your business. Making sure that your business is classified as what you actually do. If you have talking about somebody you said has a demolition business, but they were being listed as a carpentry business. Those are two different risk classes. And if you have them mislabeled and then you file a claim that's very obviously not for the service that you provide, you open yourself to a whole world of hurt, not only on that claim, but they can go back, as I understand it, kind of price your premium for what it should have been this entire time.
For the actual exposure, especially in your workman's comp. But they can also do it in your general liability. Everything in commercial insurance is its own bag of tricks.
Right.
And so everything is based upon the class code of your business. And if you do, say you do 10 different things, you actually have to split it up into all 10 different things and how much of each thing your employees are doing. And you need to make sure every single one of those class codes is on your general liability, because if you're doing something outside of those, you don't actually have coverage.
Right.
If you're like, oh, today we're going to be ditch diggers and tomorrow we're going to be roofers, that does not work for your insurance company. They say no to that. Whatever's on the paperwork, that's what you're covered for. And if you decided to dig a ditch and somebody or something got hurt,
snaps their
sorry,
ankle.
not sorry. They are not going to cover it.
Well, and we talk a lot about business add-ons, bolt-ons, and we're all about that, growing and expanding your business that way. But that does come with its own. You have a roofing company, you decide to add gutters to your services. You then need to, hey, I now offer this service. I need to add a new policy for that service, and that type of workman's comp and that type of everything needs to be covered appropriately, because the second that you are not appropriately covered, that hurts the pocketbook quite a bit, and then you have to go back, change all those things, and start paying it anyway, but now with a claim on file.
Yeah. Well, and then also, you have to be cognizant of height. A lot of policies will say, okay, you can do this, but only up to like 2 stories.
Right.
Then if you get into the 3rd story or above or stuff like that, there's a difference. Or going down. If you're digging, you can only go down so far. This sounds so complicated, and honestly, it truly is super complicated. That's why it's really important to have a great insurance agent who's going to sit down with you and actually analyze and really truly look at everything you're doing in your business and put together a package that really covers all your risk and really protects you, because there is so much nuance to it, especially if you're doing anything that goes up high or goes down low. Those are really complicated risks.
Well, you think about that, right? You may have started off as a residential roofer, right? And you're like, I'm just going to do houses locally. And you're doing these 2-story houses, and that's all well and good. And then you come across this opportunity to take on this great commercial roof, and you're like, sweet, this is so much more money. I could bring on some contractors to make this happen. And you're excited. You take on the job because you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Really, it's not about not knowing the work, but then you go up there and then something happens and you realize that you were completely uncovered for anything up on that, 15th story roof that you're working on.
Definitely fancy coverage.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The cost of taking on that sort of a job is a lot more expensive, because you do want to have protection. And if you don't, it opens your business up to lawsuits, to liabilities that you weren't prepared for. You may not have factored in the increased cost of insurance on a job like that.
You think to yourself, oh my gosh, I hired 3 new employees. Yay, yay, yay. This is the thing. All of your commercial policies are all based upon what's called projected premium. It's based, so a lot of them are based on your amount of labor. So whatever your payroll cost is. Your workman's comp is 100% based on payroll. When you hire that new employee, you actually need to call your agent and say, hey, I hired a new employee. I need to up my coverage rate. Because at the end of the year, and you all have gone through this, you get a piece of paper that says you're going through an audit, and you're like, what? I'm being audited, because we've been trained by the IRS that an audit is a bad thing. In insurance, an audit is totally normal. It's every single year. It's always going to happen, because they said, okay, we think you're going to have blank amount of payroll exposure. We're going to charge you blank. But at the end of the year, they need to figure out if that's true or not. And it goes both ways. Like, I have a client literally just this week, I knew he had paid too much. The audit was all crazy. And I was like, no, we need to reopen this audit. We need to redo this. This is messed up. So we did. And I ended up not only getting an $8,000 bill knocked off, but then getting him $6,000 in return premium. It was literally a $14,000 swing in his direction in a good way, because we reopened this audit and we redid the paperwork properly. Don't be afraid. It's not the IRS. They're not coming to get you. They're just trying to make the math true, because they said, okay, we thought this. This is what's true. This is how much you owe. And so what happens, though, a lot of times is if you hire a lot of people or you grow exponentially and you didn't tell your agent, or your agent didn't actually update the premium, which I have seen before too, then you end up with a giant bill at the end of the year. And the crazy thing about audit premiums is that's stuff you should have paid the year before. So they don't put you on lengthy payment plans. They want their money today. They wanted it yesterday, because they've already covered you for that. So it's completely earned, completely owed. There's no way around it.
Like you said, everything is set up in advance, right? So you set it up, and like you said, it's just, hey, we think we are going to be able to bring on a couple more employees this year. Okay, great. And then at the end of the year, They've already provided this. I mean, this is not charging you for next year. We've already covered you throughout the year. If anything would have happened, we would have been required to pay it out. But as such, we're going to go back and we're going to say, okay, well, if we would have known this is how many employees you had, this would have been your premium.
Yeah.
And so we need to make that right now.
Yep.
And next year we will say, hey, are you going to expand further? So it's important to have an agent who A, understands all of this, and B, is willing to take the time to sit and discuss with you what your business is going to look like over the next 12 months for that renewal period, and to make sure that everything's in line. And you probably should be having a lot more conversations with your insurance agent as a business owner than you have been, than you want to.
Yeah, and you want to have minimum a yearly sit down with them and a full audit of your coverage, because that's the thing too. Like, so there's a fun coverage called inland marine, which is for all your tools that move from place to place to place. Like, I had a client, or I guess I still have the client, but when we first started working together, I was talking to him and he had insurance for his truck, but I was like, hey, your truck has a lot of stuff in it, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, where's your inland marine? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's in my truck. Isn't that covered?
It's not a boat.
I know. It's called inland marine. I did not make up this name. Okay. It's a terrible, I do agree with you. It's a terrible name for this type of coverage.
That's what I'm saying. It's probably what he was thinking.
Yeah. He was like, what are you talking about?
I don't have a boat.
It has nothing to do with boats. It has to do with way back when, in like the 1800s. I took this big test and I had to learn about why it's called that. But it is called that. It's called inland marine. And it covers all your things, like your piddly things, which sometimes are not so piddly.
Right.
Anything that's $2,500 and under, that's your tools and all your stuff, is covered on your inland marine. And you can have huge inland marine coverages. Like in my company, I had a $300,000 inland marine coverage because we had so many tools and we had all our tooling, right? We did a lot of diamond cutting and grinding little diamonds that were like the size of a credit card, but each one could be up to $1,000.
Right.
If you have something the size of a credit card that costs $1,000 and you have to have at least between 6 and 12 of them in a set, and you got lots of sets, it's a lot. And so if it had been stolen, that would have been really disastrous. You have to have this inland marine coverage. So my client had none, and he had about $25,000 in tools on his truck. And I'm like, oh, we need to get that in place right away, because if someone steals your truck, not only are they stealing your truck, which is covered, they're also stealing all your tools, which are not covered. So you would get paid out for the truck, but they're going to give you bupkis for that $25,000 in tools.
Right.
And if you don't have $25,000 sitting to self-insure, then you're in a bad place. And so we need to get that coverage in place. As I'm saying, there's a lot of nuance. We have to make sure all of our stuff is covered. And then those tools that are over $2,500, those need to be scheduled or listed on your policy individually. So you have to have every single one. I've seen big old schedules.
Yeah, that's a long list for a lot of businesses, but that's the nature of it. That's real. That's what it is. Yep. That's what you need coverage.
Because that's you proving that these are the actual things I own and this is the price that it costs to replace them. Because if you don't have that proof, they're not going to pay out, and they're not going to give you that coverage when stuff gets stolen.
Oh, and like any other profession, not all insurance agents are created equal. Most of them do not understand this. Commercial is a very specialized type of coverage, and having an agent who understands that and knows that you need to understand how my business is running. And like I said, you're going to have to talk to them probably more than you want to. You know, the second that you get something large that you weren't anticipating, it's probably time to have that conversation. We're going to take on this big job. I need to make sure that we're covered. I need to make sure that we have enough coverage in case something happens. And nobody likes it. It's the most boring, fulfilling part of owning a business, but it is one of the most important parts to making sure that you can survive any sort of incident that you weren't anticipating.
And especially these days, stuff's getting stolen all the time. People are really litigious. You just want to make sure you're protected, right? The last thing you want is for all of your hard work to just be taken away from you in building your business because one box wasn't checked or line item wasn't covered. It's worth taking the time and sitting down with a really good professional and somebody who's specialized in commercial insurance. And I wouldn't necessarily go to like the big guys that specialize in commercial insurance because they specialize in the big guys. Going to, somebody who's, I guess, mid-level. That sounds bad, but you know what I mean? There's these huge companies.
Right.
If you're a smaller company, they don't really care about you, honestly. So if you just go to somebody local who you trust, and then if you want a second set of eyes, there's more insurance agents out there than you would know. As I said, most people don't realize we are. A ton of people around that can take take a look and just make sure that all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Well, not all insurance agents have access to all carriers either. Somebody may be giving you the best deal that they could find or the best coverage that they could find, but they may not have access to one carrier who specializes in covering the type of business that you run.
Yeah.
So having a second set of eyes is never the worst thing in the world. Just make sure that you feel very confident in the coverage that you're getting, and it sounds like the person you're speaking to understands your business and understands what it is you're looking for before you kind of cross that bridge.
Yeah, and make sure to look at the documents yourself. Like, this is back before I was an agent, but I had my concrete company, and we actually had a trailer stolen. The trailer was worth about $7,000. Contacted the insurance company, and they're like, it looks like the stated value is $3,500. I'm like, what are you talking about? This trailer is worth, double that. And she was like, she's like, I'm not sure. Let me look into this. And so she did, and she got back to me, and she's like, well, unfortunately, when the policy was put in place, they put a stated value. They said, this is how much it's worth, and that's how much you've been paying premium on. She's like, if you didn't have any stated value, then we would give you the $7,000 because it's whatever the actual value is. She's like, but since your agent put the stated value there, that's how much we're going to give you coverage for. Call my agent. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Why did you put $3,500 in here? And he's like, let me look at my notes. I'll get back to you. So he calls me back a couple days later, and he says, there's a question mark here. I'm like, okay, you must have told me. Like, why in the world would I tell you that my trailer was worth half what it was worth? And he's like, well, I don't know. I don't know why it's that. You must have told me at some point. He obviously did not say my agent for long because he cost me a whole bunch of money. But at the end of the day, there's nothing I could do about it then. I mean, I guess, okay, I could have done, claim, whatever. Point being, without going to a huge hassle, I just had to take the loss. At the end of the day, whatever's on the paper, you sign it. You're saying, yes, this is true. You need to read it and see what it's saying. See, a lot of times, people to get your business because they think you're only shopping on price, they'll bottom out coverages, they'll up deductibles, they'll do a whole bunch of technically legal things,
right?
But they're not what coverage you need. So, and just to make sure that everything, is the way it needs to be. It's always worth it to spend more upfront and have it done right than to find out after the fact that it was done wrong.
I mean, it always seems like a good idea, right, to just not spend the money. Like, well, I don't really need that. What's the likelihood that this will happen? Blah, blah, blah. And it always seems like the short-term pain seems like it's too much. Mm-hmm. But once you felt the long-term pain for not sacrificing that short-term pain, then you really know what it's about and why you should have maybe just bit the bullet and taken care of that on the front end. But I think all of this is, like I said, it's kind of a boring topic, but it's very, very important in making sure that your business is protected and making sure that you can make it through any sort of catastrophe that comes about that you couldn't anticipate.
Yeah. Yay, insurance.
Anything else on this topic?
Oh, I probably could go on, but I'm not going to pain anyone.
Yeah. Just definitely take a look at all that paperwork. Make sure you got everything in place. That's really the overall arcing message of today's show. So
yeah, just be proactive. I feel like I say that every single episode. Let's think proactively. But it's what we're all about is being proactive. So
awesome. Well, that'll do it for this episode, guys, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Wealth Club, and we'll see you next time.